Yeah, I think it had stopped a little
Got
bit
it.
ago,
Okay. Thank you,
unfortunately.
Allison. Thanks for checking in on that. Awesome. Well, uh, John, do you want to restate your question and then we can hear from Allison a bit? We'll start with that and then we can do the breakouts.
Yeah, absolutely. Allison, in our discussion of everything for legislation or legislative initiatives, it was voiced by a couple of us that are state employees that we need some additional guidance on what we can and cannot do, just to make sure that we are complying with the rules of a state employee engaging in legislative activities.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, John. And so I ran that through my team during this meeting, and state classified employees can contribute to the creation of legislative recommendations as members of the task force. And so we just, as we get to the like the approval of recommendations, and if recommendations might um, be targeted towards any of our agencies, then that's where we need to ensure that as state employees, we're not committing, resources or recommendations to our agencies as well that way. But we can cross that bridge if that comes up. But essentially, as task force members, you are representing the task force as you are here.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments along those lines? Great. So we'll do updates and then, but please, this isn't just report out, folks. Please ask each other questions. You can drop questions in the chat, or if you have any comments related to what each other has been working on, please use this time for some discussion as well. I know it's a little bit more awkward virtually, but hopefully we can host a little bit of that. So I'm just going to go through kind of the list I have up on my screen. So can we start with hearing from the fire risk and management group?
Yep, I can kick that off. So our group, I think last time I told you we felt like we were pretty far behind. Ray's worked with us. We're getting caught up. So
Great.
we've got the uh, five executive order tasks, and we feel like most of them fall actually under E, which is determine which recommendations from the Federal Wildfire Mitigation Management Commission are suitable for implementation, at the state and local level. So there are 100, I forget what it is, 146 recommendations there in that document. We pared them down to about 50 some. We met in person last week and had some good discussion and pared them down even further. A lot of them we kicked out because they're just either very federal specific, certain federal agencies, things like that. We've been in touch with some of the other groups. Some of them we've decided to punt. We feel like they're relevant to Colorado, but not necessarily as part of the fire group. More watershed or forest health related stuff. So we can have a couple discussions on that. Um, Long story short, I think last week we got it down to 29 recommendations in a couple of categories here. So we got a couple of recommendations that kind of fall under response operations and planning. We've got a handful of recommendations under coordination, metrics, and oversight, and some of that's response. Some of that is fuels and mitigation type projects, pre-fire work. Um, we've got probably our biggest category here is funding and financial mechanisms, which I'm sure no other group has funding challenges. Then we got three recommendations under prescribed fire and fuels treatment we're reviewing, and then three under workforce and training, and a couple under building codes and community design. And then we've got some overlap with some data science and technology, as well as some public health and post fire impacts. And so, really, we're just trying to pull all that back into context of the current pine beetle epidemic and what can make a difference here in the next few years on the Front Range, versus some things that we think we can lay some groundwork now for long-term sustainability, forest health, reduced fire um, to hopefully set us up for success in the long haul. So it's a little bit of a balance on those things. We spent some time today kind of going back and combing through those and um, just trying to delve in and see what actual metrics we would like to use and work with, and what there is legislative or policy or business rules that we need to look to make some recommendations on. So I think I'm going to leave it mostly there. Some great discussions. I think our group in general is not very hopeful for too many legislative issues. Just the current, most of them are going to revolve around funding, which just really isn't going to happen in the next couple of years here. So certainly we'll have a few legislative recommendations, but I think the bulk of our recommendations are going to be more policy changes or changes to, what a state grant application looks like or what it's being graded on, things like that. So that's kind of the direction we're headed, and I'll leave it there unless anybody else from the group has something to add.
Thanks, Brad. And you've made a lot of good progress on that. That was many recommendations to sort through. And as he mentioned, there are, in going through that commission report, there are many recommendations that may relate to other working groups here. And so in time, we'll be kind of circling back with some of the other working groups on the potential of also either connecting with the fire risk and management group on some of these, or in reviewing and selecting some that your working group might want to propose moving forward. Madeline, oh.
That was exactly my
Good.
question. Yeah, I certainly know there's a few recommendations in the commission's report that would be quite relevant to our work group.
Awesome.
And we'd be happy to defer if the fire group wanted to, take those on. But if their fire group's only focusing on fire, then yeah,
Yep.
please let us know, and we'll
Okay.
take on ones.
That is exactly the plan. And so you're welcome to begin reviewing that report and considering what recommendations you might want to advance anytime that you want. I can also have like a separate conversation with you about it and maybe show you the spreadsheet that the fire group put together to kind of start sorting and going through, because there's so many of them. But we can have a chat about that. Awesome. Well, can we hear from the Forest Health and Watershed Working Group?
Yeah, I can kick us off for Forest and Watershed, and yeah, anyone else from the work group, feel free to chime in. I'll say I think our work group is thinking about forest health as a whole beyond just mountain pine beetle, and really treating the increase in beetle activity as maybe a symptom of the root cause of ecologically departed forests, and how do we get back there at scale. So a lot of the recommendations that we're talking about, there's some policy recommendations that we could pursue this year, but they are really for improving the system as a whole, and thinking of the long-term implications of a lot of this. One of the things we talked about is just how many values there are in forest and watershed management, recreation, wildlife, water supplies, community protection, ecological inherent value, and how many different plans there already are in this space. And one idea that Chris Sturm has brought to our attention is the need for maybe a comprehensive mapping product to see where all of the different plans that already exist in the state overlap. We're thinking an interactive product, a GIS-based product that you can zoom into your area of interest, see what other plans for other values already exist, who your potential partners and funding sources could be. I think just from all of our knowledge, there's a ton of those out there. And so one of our legislative recommendations that I'd like to make is some resources for that statewide comprehensive mapping product, the analysis of all of those different plans, and then coming up with a product to make it easily accessible. So you know what your limitations are, who your potential partners are, and potential funding sources. So one way that we can merge all of those values. I think we also decided there needs to be some capacity to manage all the different values and priorities and plans as well. And we talked about even a new, state position like regional coordinators, essentially filling a cross-agency coordination position to help manage all the different values and priorities that each organization brings, and kind of be the keeper of all the different initiatives and plans in certain areas of the landscape, so that we can still be place-based, but have that better understanding of where to connect into larger pictures. Some of our longer term items we'd like to work on are surveys and getting through environmental assessments and permitting processes. We talked about how we can get more prescribed fire on non-federal lands. We've talked about how to balance ecological restoration with fuels treatments and what areas to do that. So a lot of other barriers to the system that we've identified, but our two legislative recommendations so far: the mapping product and regional coordinators. Anyone else from the work group have anything to add?
I'll just add, we did talk about trying to figure out how to have some more time to work with the science folks, that working group. So that's it.
Thanks for that. And on my list of things to do once we get through the 18th is start keeping track of all the kind of cross coordination requests. So I've gotten a few via email, but please you can note them in your sheets, and also email myself, John, and Allison directly with those requests. And then I'm going to start to map up who's trying to talk to who and see if there's a targeted way we can make that happen, either within our current meetings or if we need like a special kind of extra meeting to do that. Next, can we hear from the local engagement group?
Sure, I can jump in here. So for the local engagement group, we've actually been in the process of merging the public communications and education group with this group. So I'll definitely let Chris speak to a few things too. But what we've been kind of focused on from the last meeting is just these different aspects of our strategy. So there's kind of the initial strategy around making sure that local entities have the information that they need to respond to constituent concerns, to kind of express the urgency of this issue. Also to just make sure that we have like the tools available to do the communications and outreach at the local level. So Chris will speak to that, what we can kind of expect next week. As far as kind of the legislative recommendations, we had a pretty small but mighty team today. And so we just really kind of were starting to surface what recommendation components would need to have. So for example, because we're focused on local engagement, we can't really be having any recommendations that are expected to be implemented at the local level that are an unfunded mandate, right? That will not be met with a lot of support. It also erodes trust, and also making sure that we are providing funding to support local entities in whatever type of implementation measures that they need. So just kind of echoing that same sentiment around funding being a need at this working group as well. Also just kind of reemphasizing, that there is a timeline associated with a lot of the recommendations. So especially for the local level entities, like if we are asking them to do things to address this issue, like do we actually have the recommendations put forward in a timely process to put those types of actions into play while the epidemic is occurring, or is it more kind of in a remediation sort of fashion? So really considering like when we actually put forth the recommendations and whether or not we have those that go forward in priority bills, or if there's things that need to wait to the long bill, like really just kind of balancing those things. And then one piece that we really flagged was as more of an opportunity, but also funding being a barrier for this is this epidemic could go on like the last one did over a decade, right? And so if we're going to continue to do outreach and education, like we need to be able to have the funding to sustain a communications plan long term, to sustain the outreach and education long term, and also thinking about the different types of audiences and the timeline that that entails. So just being really cognizant of all of that. And then the last piece that I'll just flag here is, as far as a gap, is really just thinking through kind of the overlapping or cascading issues that are happening simultaneously. So, things like drought are obviously going to be top of mind for the legislature. Wildfire is going to be top of mind. So I think all of us come to this work from kind of more of that holistic lens, but are there opportunities to leverage from that perspective, but also making sure that we're not developing recommendations in a silo that could be supported or leveraged across those other areas. So I know we talk a lot about wildfire, but I think also talking about the drought component too, and how that has exacerbating issues for this work as well. It's just really important for us to keep in mind. So I think that's everything, but I'll turn it over to Chris really quick too to speak to the public engagement side of things too.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Let me just say it was great sort of being part of a larger group. I think the merging of our sort of work groups is going to work out really well. So just really quickly, some of the follow-up on the public education side, that some materials that we are working on for you all. First off is our general talking points for the task force for you all, really focus more on what your current work is doing and what the task force is currently doing, and then some of the work that you're working towards. We're making good progress on that. We're also working on enhancing the existing DNR web page that we have for the task force. We already have some drafts on that, and so hopefully we should have that by next week. And the idea with that is just we could just use some enhanced information on there instead of having sort of a basic web page. We're working on that. Also working on a slideshow for you all, something that you all could take with you if you're giving a presentation as a task force member. Just have some slides in hand. Of course, you could always add on to them or anything like that, but you could just have some good basic facts on what the mountain pine beetle problem is and what the task force is doing. We are working with the State Forest Service on that. And then, just on the talking points too, it was brought up we should add a social media toolkit, which is a really good idea. So we will do that. Specifically working on talking points around wildfire and mountain pine beetle. And Mike, I think your team's made good progress on that as well. So we should be able to share that. And then lastly was kind of a resource toolbox as well. Some of the other things are a little higher on that priority list, but that's something we're working on. That was it for me.
Excellent. That all sounds great. Thank you for both of the updates, and then thank you for sharing some of the things the interagency comms team is working on. Can we hear from workforce and markets working group, please?
So I'm Zach Thode. I'm on the task force, but I guess I get the straw to report out. There wasn't very many people in this group, not enough to vote on a new member, but we had a pretty good conversation about a number of things. To start with, just talking about how to fund new commercialization in Colorado. A couple of thoughts come out. One is that has been used in the legislature before, but would require a fair bit of work on our end. And maybe we're not quite ready for that much work, but is to do a tax credit type program that incentivizes new business that does woody biomass markets of some sort, whatever they might be. And what that tax credit program would look like is similar to some of the other tax credit programs that the state has ran successfully. So it wouldn't be recreating something new, it'd just be implementing an old trick for a new practice. The other one that is kind of curious that we talked about is, could local governments reduce their building permit fees if builders used local products to help incentivize the use of Colorado's wood products, and how that could roll out. Of course, that's a county by county type situation, we think, and that gets a little more complicated, but maybe there's a way to incentivize local products, and that's fun. A couple other conversations came out about local governments and some of their properties around the mountain areas that could be used as sort yards, and maybe partnering with conservation districts who have access to, or pretty decent access to, farm bill monies to do woody or to do forest health projects and manage some of these projects, and then be able to use partners with local governments, counties, cities, others to develop sort yards where wood could be moved out of the forest into a sort yard and then shifted to the right place rather than having to truck all the stuff and then retruck it and retruck it and retruck it. We also were trying to understand which commercialization uses the most wood the fastest, just to try to get an idea of which one should be prioritized first, and how to implement those things first, whether that's engineered wood products or biogas or whatever. So we talked about those things. A couple other conversations that came up is I've been told there's an enterprise fund to help cover the cost of risk mitigation for pile burning. That keeps being brought up, but it's not being utilized. So the question is how does that thing work? Can we make it work better? Can we get more people involved such that it actually gets used? Because as near as I can tell from the people I talk to, it doesn't get used. On most of the forestry projects that we work on, we're still trucking green pine needles and tiny little branches out of the forest that could very easily be burned on site in a pile with very little risk. But we need to find ways to kind of streamline that process, and it would cut the cost of our projects in half very fast if we could just get that done. And so that's something we think we should incentivize. Another thing that we think could help a bunch is to mimic the Colorado Ag Development Authority's efforts to incentivize young producers to get into the business. So whether that is helping buy down interest rates on new equipment or other things to try to get young people into the game so they can buy a feller buncher for $500,000 and they get a little discount on their insurance rates, or not insurance rates, but interest rates. So it's a little easier for them to buy equipment to go do the work. So that seems like a really good path. We think that there's a place that the conservation districts and Larimer Conservation District, which I'm the chair, we do a ton of work on private land. We think there's opportunities for others to do more. And maybe we just need to educate more of the conservation districts of the opportunities with the Farm Bill and with the state forest and other grant agencies to do more. And then the last thing, this one might sound a little crazy, is I think that all log trucks coming out of the forest should have farm plates on them instead of commercial plates. And it makes it much more affordable for those trucks to do their work if they can run farm plates than commercial plates. And it reduces some of the regulations they have to go through. So I think that's all that we talked about.
Thanks, Zach. And Judy, we're just about at time, so I'm going to hear the update from science, and then you can ask your question or say your comment.
All right, we didn't draw straws, but I'm guessing it's me. Yeah, we had a really great discussion. We lost a couple members that went to other of the newly formed work groups, but we welcomed a couple new members to our work group. And so there was a little getting folks up to speed. I'll share, we have one, I think, recommendation that we're working through is something broadly to ensure that the insect and disease surveys continue throughout the entire state of Colorado. There's some concerns about federal staffing, getting enough pilots that are certified, but also the federal infrastructure and the IT and the databases and where all that data is stored and how we want to address that moving forward and what the state's role might be in that. So ensuring that that data collection continues in some way, I think is a recommendation that is developing with us. And we've spent the majority of our time talking about beetles and fire. And so we have started a Word document, a Google Doc in our shared workspace, where we're distilling down some talking points about beetles and fire. And I know that the fire risk and response work group is also, I guess I'm unsure if that whole work group is developing talking points or is just the Division of Fire Prevention Control and their agency specific. So our understanding was there was an ask from the Science and Research Work Group to do that. So we've been working on that for a week now. We just started and got everyone up to speed now. And I think we're making really good progress and having some good discussions. It was fun to actually talk about beetles and forests and fire.
Amazing. Thank you. And at our next meeting, we on the 18th, we can chat a little bit more about that. I know across DFPC and some of what the interagency comms team is putting together. I know some of these talking points around Beetles and Fire will be covered. And then I think we can share that kind of internally with the task force members to feel a little bit more confident in talking about that. So thank you so much both for your update and for your work on that. And then super briefly, because we're done, but the policy folks had to hop off, but essentially they gave me their update. They are here to help craft and finalize any legislative recommendations or funding recommendations or requests that task force members put together in working groups. So they themselves did not note that they are going to move forward with kind of doing their own legislative recommendations. And then we are set to end, but for Jody, if you wanted to mention your comment, if Zach's still able to stay on, is that okay, Allison?
Yeah, really quick. Just wanted to say with the Forest Health and Council and the Fire Commission and other groups have already been working on pile burning risk and limitations, and there has already been 2 to 3 years of work on the liability, the risks, and the Forest Health Council's working on transportation and logging truck. It's more than just changing the plates, it's the weight limits and all that stuff that's on right now. And the fire and there's so many liability and risk insurance issues. So I think the sort of
Jody, you're cutting out. We heard some of the first part of that. Oh, you're cutting out. We did hear some of the first part of that. So it sounds like some of what Zach was talking about is in the works. So at our next meeting, we can surface some of that and see if there is something that this task force can tap into in relation to all of this. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time for our working group. And for those who can make it, I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. We'll get that voting approved.
Sounds good. Thank you. Take care.
Ray, do you want to stop recording?
Yes. And it'll just automatically